you have to be very careful because you might have a customer who is one of the worst people you'll ever meet in your life and makes you regret ever opening up a business. And you will have a reaction to that person. But keep in mind, everything can be edited. There is always there is always a side of the story that person's going to spin that could damage your brand. So always take a deep breath and always respond with intention. Because if you're going to be the face of your brand, your face could be the thing that could destroy your brand.
Hey there, I'm Emily Washkovic, Yelp small business expert. Here on Behind the Review, I interview entrepreneurs and industry leaders to get tips and tricks that can help your business grow. Are you ready to learn the real secret behind building a brand that people love? Bobby Berk, the designer, best-selling author, and TV host, is someone who's worked everywhere, from TGI Fridays to Target to now owning his own brand. And he shared why culture, authenticity, and respect are at the heart of his success. Plus, you'll hear what he wished he'd known before he became the name of his brand. Let's give our conversation a listen. This week is a very special episode. We have Bobby Berk, the founder and CEO of Bobby Berk Home, but Bobby is also an Emmy award-winning TV host, an actor, a designer, and the best-selling author of his book, Right at Home. Bobby, thank you so much for joining us today on Behind the Review.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
I would love to go back to the early days of your entrepreneurship, which was actually in the brick-and-mortar space. Can you tell everyone about the beginning of what your entrepreneurial journey looked like?
Yeah, so I actually started my brand online. I was one of the first online retailers selling furniture out there ever. Like, Amazon was still selling books. There was really only, I think, one other online furniture retailer out there. My biggest hurdle was getting manufacturers to want to sell to me because they said, online, no one's going to buy furniture online. It's got to be, they want to touch it. They want to feel it. So they're like, if you had a store, we'd also let you sell online. But my hardest thing was getting people to let me carry their products. So I eventually was like, all right, well, I guess I need a brick and mortar store. So I opened up, it's the very, very small version of the story, but I opened up my first brick and mortar store in Soho in New York. Then I opened up Miami, and then Atlanta, and then Los Angeles. And it was a fun run. I had stores for about 10 years before I decided designing is much more fun than retail. Let me just stick with my design firm. So as leases expired, so did my stores, and we just focused on the design business. But yeah, I had many, many, many years. And before I had my own retail, I worked retail. I worked restaurants. So I worked Restoration Hardware, the Bombay Company, The Great Outdoors, RIP, Gap, Structure, aka Express, The Body Shop. I'm sure I'm forgetting many of them, but Applebee's, Ruby Tuesdays, TGI Fridays, Target, Walmart, all of them. So I've been very, very customer centric and customer facing for many, 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 many years.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's kind of the heart of your brand as you pivoted and grew is so much your personality and what you bring to the customer experience. Can you talk a little bit about as you grew, what that looked like? Because again, you are the brand, were the brand, but you've expanded and really grown your design business. So what did that stage look like?
So the expansion of the retail or into the design business?
When you were actually expanding the design business, I'm interested in because I feel like that is so much like you are the designer that people want to work with,
Right.
But now you have many designers as a part of your team. So they have to kind of carry out that same vibe and approach that you do.
Yeah, so expanding the design business was fun. I started out with, we moved to LA in 2015. And I opened an office out here, and I started out with one assistant, and he now runs my design firm. He'll be with me for 10 years next month, and then my other lead designer, she's been with me 9 years. So And one of my operations managers, she's been with me, I think, 14 years. She started out as an assistant manager of one of my stores in Miami, and we randomly reconnected at my castmate Karamo's Halloween party a few years ago, and she came back to work for me again. So off and on, she's been with me for 14 years. So to your point of people have to really know my aesthetic, they do. So Adam, who runs my design firm, again, he's been with me since the very first home we launched and designed back in 2015. And so he's grown with me. He knows the decisions I would make. He knows the looks I would want it. And our taste is pretty much one and the same now.
I love that. And I think that speaks to the culture that you've cultivated too, because people want to stick around. They want to be a part of the brand. How do you think you've accomplished that? Is there any trick to having a good culture?
I think it's about respect. So many people, so many bosses often are like, I'm the boss. You are the employee. That is the narrative. That is the situation here. And that is true to an extent. But to me, it is all about respect. It is all about not micromanaging people. It is all about giving them the empowerment to do their job, but the freedom to still have a life. I think that is very, very important. We have an unlimited PTO policy. And I know a lot of people, and rightly so, because of the companies they work for, say, oh, that's such a scam. They don't want to pay out your holiday. They know that it's unlimited, but they don't approve it. And they're not wrong. But that's not the case at my company. Sometimes I'm like, wait a second, I should have thought this through. Because, my my team, they will be doing their job from the beach. They will be, I am that type of boss that as long as you get your job done, I don't care how you do it, obviously within reason, or where you do it, as long as things get done. And I've just created a culture of freedom and responsibility. You have the freedom you want, but use it responsibly. And in all these years, we've never had anybody that didn't, because they appreciated the freedom that I give them. We don't have a total work from home policy, but everybody gets a 1 day a week work from home. And again, it's unlimited PTO. So honestly, they could technically work from home as much as they want to, but we're a design firm. So most of the time they want to be in the office because it's a very collaborative job. You want to be in there with the samples and your coworkers because it's, you're talking about the design. But yeah, so I think the key to having people that have been with me for more than a decade is freedom and responsibility, treating them with respect, treating them with kindness. We had a new person who started, I guess she's been with me over a year now. But she made a comment one day. She was like, I just have to say, my last boss really just ruled with fear. You didn't want to do a good job because you wanted to better the company or you wanted to make your boss happy. You did a good job because you were scared that if you didn't do a good job, you were going to get fired, which, eventually, if you didn't do a good job, you would. But you were going to get yelled at. You were going to be demeaned. You were going to be disrespected. She's like, everybody here just always wants to do a good job because they're happy, So I worked for a lot of awful people in my career. And I have just always told myself I would put my team first. And that's what I do.
And I think it's important as an entrepreneur to do that for yourself too, to take time to disconnect and recharge. I saw you're about to go to Vietnam for a while. So Speak to the importance of that as well. I think, taking time to recharge and step away, even as an entrepreneur, is important.
Well, as an entrepreneur, often it's very hard. I know I see people comment on social, I wish I worked for myself and I could do whatever, whenever I want. No. Sometimes I wish I had that 9-to-5 job where I could punch in and punch out and my time was my time. Because as an entrepreneur, your business is 24/7. So I remember, especially when I had my stores, retail is tough. There's always something, especially in the retail business where they're shipping furniture and there's so many third parties that you're relying on. we would go away and we would be in Asia or Europe or somewhere, and I would end up being up all night when I should be sleeping, dealing with things back home. And then during the day, I'd be exhausted when my husband would want to go do things because I'd been up all night. So I think it goes back to treating your team great, because if you have the right people behind you, you can take that time. And, I'm at a different part in my life where I can go away to Vietnam and live for a month because I have a great team that I can rely on and I know have my back because I always have their back.
That's a good goal for entrepreneurs. Build that team so they can run without you for a little bit so you can reset. Yeah. Okay, let's talk a little bit about authenticity. You have such a public persona. I mean, you really have a brand that you've developed. And I think a lot of times business owners have a hard time doing that, showing up online or telling the story of their brand. Do you have any advice, at least just to get started, or for business owners who maybe are nervous to put themselves out there?
So when I started BobbyBerkHome.com, it was a knee-jerk reaction. The company I worked for went bankrupt overnight. I had built their e-commerce division. And so I just quickly went online and registered BobbyBerkHome.com and cloned that database real quick and launched it on my own, thinking I'll sell a sofa or two while I look for another job. I ended up selling more than a few, and it did really, really well. But one thing I always said, if I ever thought this brand was going to be as successful as it was, I would have come up with a different name. Because it is often very hard being the face of the brand, especially when there were retail stores, because I was on the floor of my retail stores all the time, because anybody that works retail knows that it is often very hard to keep people long, because it's a very stressful job. So there would be times I would be the only one working on the floor because I was having a hard time keeping staff, especially in some of the, like in Miami, people want to be in the beach in Miami. It was very hard to get consistent people in Miami. And so once people heard my name, Bobby, they're like, oh, you're the owner. Oh, well, what about a discount? Or what about this? And so for years, I actually said my name was Kevin. Yeah, I had a complete alter ego. I was Kevin. Kevin had his own email. Kevin is who had to get involved when there were some customer service issues where customers were being, anybody in retail knows there are customers that are assholes just to be assholes, just to get discounts. Kevin had to get involved sometimes because Bobby couldn't. Bobby was the face of the brand. Bobby was the name, so my advice is be very careful. If you're going to have your name as the face, you have to remember your face is the face of that brand. And especially in the day and age of social media and everyone has a camera, you have to be very careful because you might have a customer who is one of the worst people you'll ever meet in your life and makes you regret ever opening up a business. And you will have a reaction to that person. But keep in mind, everything can be edited. There is always there is always a side of the story that person's going to spin that could damage your brand. So always take a deep breath and always respond with intention. Because if you're going to be the face of your brand, your face could be the thing that could destroy your brand. So be very careful. If you can come up with a cool name that is not your face and name, do it. Have a bit of anonymity, have a bit of privacy. I chose the route of my face and my name being the brand, which worked for me. I was able to cultivate my story and turn it into a brand, which is the reason why I think it was successful. I think especially in the mid 2000s, people really wanted to connect with brands that had a story and a person. I think some of the biggest even fashion brands out there at the time and now were the names of people where you're like, oh, that person designed this. I want to wear this. It wasn't just, a name of, oh, came from a factory somewhere. No, it came from the hands, even if that designer didn't truly do it, it came from the hands of that person. And I want a piece of that. So there can be a lot of pros to your name and face being the brand, but there can be some cons too. So just make sure you think about those.
I'm really glad you shared that because I do think that's something a lot of people don't think about, the association of them and their business and their brand. So I'm really glad you shared that with us.
And when, when hopefully it is successful enough that in years to come, you can sell it. You will always be that brand, and that for private equity, for VCs, for another buyer, that's a huge red flag for them and a huge risk because they're like, okay, so we buy this brand, we have sole rights to it. What if in a couple of years you go out and do something crazy? You've ruined our investment. Even though it is bright and shiny and perfect right now, there is always that potential for that individual to DWI anything, anything that could tarnish the brand. So just think of those things: the longevity of the brand, the stress it will add to always be that face. Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very helpful insights for people to consider. Let's talk a little bit about partnerships and collaborations.
Yeah.
You've done so many cool things with product lines and just lots of different collabs. I want to know if there's red flags, green flags. Like, how do you vet a potential collaboration and see if it might be a good partnership?
I mean, for me, there are a few things. I vet the company. I vet their executives are these people who align with me ethically, both morally, business-wise. And then also, is it a product that I actually use? Or is it a product that now that I am aware of this product, I will actually use? If it is not, I won't. I won't just flood my socials with product partnerships for things that I have never used and I have no intention of doing so. I feel that, yes, I might be able to rake in some dough right away, but I think just for longevity, I think for true authenticity of a brand, people stop listening to you, people stop believing in you, and I don't want that. I don't want people to ever think that I'm pushing something that I would not have in my own home.
I think that's really smart because there's the short term view of, oh, this might get me the money or the views or the reach. But what is the long term potential for a good partnership or maybe misalignment that you need to think about and be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, for me, my brand is about authenticity, both on screen, in real life. I am who I am, and I'm not going to change that for a brand deal.
Yep.
To the frustration of my team sometimes.
But I think in the long run, other things have come through that were in alignment because you stayed true to who you are. And so for entrepreneurs, it's hard sometimes to look at the long term, especially when you're just trying to survive. So I get that, and you've clearly been there as well, but it is important to take a pause and make sure that there is alignment and not just do things because the opportunity came up. It needs to be a good fit.
Yeah, and again, going back to making sure your brands align morally and ethically. You're like, oh, I can look past these things maybe a little. Your customers are your customers because they believe in who you are and they align with you. Don't alienate your customers.
Absolutely. Okay, let's talk a little bit about design tips for our small business owners. I'm thinking of anyone who has a brick and mortar, and you've made over quite a few businesses in your time. What do you think are the things that business owners with a brick and mortar should be thinking of primarily when they're setting up that space? What are the most important elements when it comes to design?
I mean, the most important element is function. How is it going to function for you and your team? If you are a customer-focused business, how is it going to function for your customers? If you're a restaurant, if you're fast casual, if you're retail, how is that going to flow? Also, I know it's a little more front and center these days, but in retail, like ADA compliance, you don't always think about that. Restaurants, ADA compliance, not only is it good to be ADA compliant because you need to be accessible to everyone, but it is also a way to protect yourself. Design wise, I know I hate kind of using this moment, or this terminology, but kind of an Instagrammable moment. You got to have them. if you are in retail, if you are in hospitality, we do Instagrammable moments at my resorts because people love them. They love taking pictures on them, in front of them, making sure your branding is in there. So it is free advertisement. You might be like, I don't want people taking it. Yes, you do. You do. You do. Unless you're just independently wealthy and you are doing this coffee shop for the fun, you do. It's free advertisement. So it is better to invest a little extra money in making that really cool design moment that's branded than to spend it later on marketing when you could be getting free marketing.
Well, and I mean, even just focusing on one small area that can be an Instagrammable moment.
Exactly.
And
Yep.
driving your customers towards that versus them taking pictures of whatever random stuff they think looks cool.
I know a lot of people do this now, but it was something that I did for a friend who opened up a bunch of salons years ago, was even Instagrammable moments in the bathroom. And I know that sounds weird, but people love, especially Gen Z, love taking pictures of themselves, and they love taking pictures of themselves in front of mirrors. So if you can have a cute, brandable, Instagrammable moment on your mirror in your bathroom, people are going to take pictures of it, and people are going to end up going to your socials or your business because they've seen it. So it's a very inexpensive thing to do, but there are even brandable moments in the bathroom.
Absolutely. I think the bathroom is prime time opportunity for Instagrammable moments. I love that. Okay, before we move on to our next topic, I feel like I have to ask a little bit about lighting and lack of clutter. I feel like those are two very important areas when it comes to brick and mortars as well. And lighting is one, I just love a good light fixture. But what kind of advice do you have for business owners? Because I feel like it needs to be well lit to get consumer engagement sometimes too.
Yes and no. I think it depends on what type of business it is. There are some fast casual restaurants maybe that lend themselves to a little brighter lighting. But there are others that lend themselves to it, because brighter lighting is going to get people in and out quicker. And in fast casual, you want that. In a higher ticket restaurant where the longer they stay, often the more they're ordering, you want it to be a little dimmer. You want it to be a little more amber color because it's more of, the lower Kelvin scale, which is on the warmer tone. That is the relaxing. Literally, our brains start producing melatonin. Obviously, you don't want them to go to sleep, but it chills them out. The brighter white light, the 4,000 to 6,000, 6,000 being like operating room light. That's what the color of the actual sun is. The sun is technically a bright white light. And our bodies, genetically, that's what causes us to wake up. So if you're wanting people to be alert in there, you're wanting people to keep moving, you want to do a brighter, whiter light. You don't want it to be sterile. You don't want it to be 6,000. But a good 4,000 Kelvin is a great way to kind of keep people moving.
That was exactly what I was looking for. I knew you would have something up your sleeve for lighting. Okay, we always on this show talk about customer feedback, reviews, just kind of that entire engagement with what people think about your business or your brand. It doesn't need to be Yelp specific, but maybe share a little bit about your philosophy when it comes to customer feedback and how you manage all of the different places I'm sure people are talking about you or your business.
That one's hard, because there are people that manipulate the review system to just be pain in the butts or to get discounts, or just to become review famous. And so it's hard. I think the key is engaging and responding. I think when there are bad reviews and people see that you did not care enough to engage and respond, I think the review becomes believable. You don't want to get combative because that also makes you like, oh, well, if they're this combative online, maybe this person's right. But respond, lay out the facts in a nice professional way, whether it be, unfortunately that's not what the situation was, but we're more than happy for you to come in and we blah, 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 blah. But I think ignoring them is not the right thing. And I think engaging in a tit for tat, calling them out as frauds and liars is also not a good look. I have had, specifically, I'm thinking of a resort who totally scammed me in Tulum. And I am not one to write a negative review. Having been in retail for so many years, you have to just have shot me in the foot and the leg and robbed me for me to actually write a bad review. But I did, because these people were just scam artists. And I saw so many other reviews of the same situation happening with other people, but these guys would just come on and just say how horrible and how these people are lying and they're just trying to get a discount and this and that. And looking at it, you're just like, oh, these guys are clearly frauds, you know? So there's a fine line between calling out somebody that might be using the review system in an inauthentic way, and wanting people to know that this isn't a legitimate person, and making yourself look like an aggravated person that might actually be the problem.
Right? I mean, I always say, like, when you're responding publicly, it's for every other person that might be looking at it. It's not necessarily for that person you're responding to. So don't go stoop to their level. You want to really keep it simple. You have shared...
State the facts, be nice, invite them back in, but, you know, don't engage in a negative way, because the people reading it, they don't know the situation. All they know is how you're reacting to it. So swallow your pride and just, do it in a professional way.
Great advice. You have been a wealth of knowledge. As we close out here, let's talk about what you're up to right now. I feel like there's a show coming. Yeah. There's a physical place that people could visit that I was stalking this morning. Tell me everything.
I noticed you started following the new one. So I have a new show coming out on HGTV. It's called Junk or Jackpot. We find people with amazing collections of all different types of things that have kind of taken over their lives and their relationships and their homes. And we help them, I help them get that under control. And we sell some of their collection to help fund a light renovation of their house. And some of them, it's, relationships are on the rocks because of their collection, all kinds of things. So it's a very fun, it's a unique show. And then I'm also opening up a new health and wellness retreat in Palm Desert, California. So we have one already called Casa, and it sleeps about 18 people. It's spread across 3 homes on 9 acres, and it's a private resort. When you rent it, you rent the whole thing. And now we have a new one opening up beginning of next year called Casa Mallorca. And it also is a health and wellness retreat. It'll sleep 22. It has resort-style pool, yoga studios, gym, massage studios, sauna, cold plunge. Like, it's a really great place to come either with a large group of friends or with a family reunion, or a really great place for health and wellness and fitness instructors to host wellness retreats.
Absolutely. And you are sharing the journey of making that place and all the renovations. So people should definitely go check that out. Bobby, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with our audience.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you get an alert next time we drop an episode. And if you want to check out Bobby's work or see what he's up to with his new projects, the links are in the show notes. If you have a question for me or want to be on a future episode, email podcasts@yelp.com. We'd love to hear from you.